Now remember how I said you don't have to memorize the vocabulary definitions word for word. You just have to have a working knowledge of it. So let's do a couple of self-quizzes here to get some practice to see if we can understand these vocabulary terms we've covered so far. So we need to fill in the blank. So what is an unwritten promise to pay the creditor? Remember, a creditor is someone who has loaned money to the business. So what do you call that? It's two words, and it's an unwritten promise to pay the creditor. It's accounts payable. Okay, next one. What do you call the amount of the assets that others own? So every company has assets, and those assets are owned by two different groups. So what do you call the portion of the assets that others own? My hint is it's also called debt, D-E-B-T. It's liabilities. What do you call the total value of items owned or partially owned by a business? This one should be easier. Assets. And what's another word for debt? Liabilities. So as you can see, liabilities can be explained two ways. You can either say it's debt or it's the amount of the assets that others own. Both are true. And then what do you call the amount of the assets that the owner owns? So remember, assets are owned by two groups of people, either the creditors, the people who have loaned the business money, and the owners. So you could have said owner's equity is the amount of assets that the owner owns, or capital, or just equity. So now being able to identify something as either an asset, liability, or as being a part of owner's equity is really important. So let's get some practice with this. So let's say you have an item for your business. That's an Apple iPad that you use for your business. Is that considered an asset, liability, or a part of owner's equity? Well, that's an asset because it's a future value. You can use it today, you can use it next month, you can use it next year. How about accounts receivable? Asset, liability, or is that part of owner's equity? Well, because this is something of value that the company owns and it has a future value, we will hopefully get to receive money in the future. That's an asset. How about accounts payable? Hopefully this one's easy. Asset, liability, or part of owner's equity? It's a liability. It's debt. This should be the easiest. Cash. Well, that's everyone's favorite asset. And Jane Doe, comma, capital. So what do you call this Jane Doe capital account? Is it part of liability, asset, or owner's equity? That's the owner's equity account called capital. And Jane Doe must be the owner. And then finally, if your company has a digital camera, that of course is an asset.